Everybody. I am Stacy Kunitz, and I am the founder and director of Blue Moon Educational Consulting. I started my business in 2017. Up until then, I was the director of admission and college counseling at the Crefeld School, which is a very small private school in Philadelphia. And in 2016, I decided that I would focus solely on college counseling, which meant a part-time job at Crefeld. And so I launched my business for my other part. And so far, it's been a really nice pairing for me to be half-time in my private practice and half-time at Crefeld.
Hi, my name is Cindy Montgomery. I'm the founder of Montgomery Admissions Consulting, where I provide college counseling services and law school admissions consulting. Growing up in a Jamaican and military household, education was really important to my family. As the first lawyer in my family, though, I understand how hard it is to break down those generational barriers, and I really try to speak life into my students' dreams, but also help them find communities and connect to other students like them.
I'm Jessica Chermak, and I'm the founder of Colleges Consulting and the co-founder of Virtual College Counselors. I got into college counseling because I wound up at a school that wasn't a great fit for me, and I didn't want other students to feel the way that I felt there. I also then wound up as a licensed professional counselor and realized that I didn't particularly enjoy being a therapist, but I did enjoy working with people as they made major life transitions. So I kind of just kept stumbling back into helping students find their way, and now I do that for a living.
Hi, I'm Sawyer Yearwood. I'm a co-founder of Virtual College Counselors, and I'm a first-generation college student. I ended up going to Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. Ended up working at Hendrix College in the admissions office. So I worked there for 4 years. I ended up working with all of our international students. I worked with DACA students. I was a first-gen mentor. I worked with a couple of the esports students that were interested in that program. And ultimately, as I wanted to make a change to be more authentic, to be more transparent, to only be beholden to students and families, because they are my favorite part of the job.
Values-based branding is the concept of aligning your business goals, your business persona, and identity with your personal values. Sometimes I think we try to separate them. This is my business mode, this is my personal mode. But really, values-based branding is bridging that gap and creating synergy between the two.
I think for me in particular, it's really hard for me not to show myself. I think that if you are someone who's known me for 5 minutes, you are pretty much seeing who I am. And so to try to hide myself, I think feels really, inauthentic and really challenging. I don't think I can do it. So I think it's really the value to me in being comfortable in showing myself is that I feel like my clients know who they're getting and they know, they're hiring me because of who I am rather than, in spite of who I am or finding out about who I am later. Yeah, working with clients who I don't see eye to eye with or who I have disagreements with is really challenging. And I think for me, mostly it comes down to that they count prestige heavily in their search. And I just don't really buy into that so much. What I usually do is I use some language to say that I'm having a disagreement that kind of says, so I often will say, I'd like to push back on that a little bit, or let's explore that idea and then try to uncover what it is that is beneath um, that value for them, right? Why is prestige important? And what I usually find is that there's fear underneath that if there is no prestige, then what am I really doing, and is it going to be worth the money, and is my kid going to succeed? I just try to chip away at it little by little, and I try to listen.
I try really hard not to have clients that I disagree with. I think that's why the vetting process in the beginning and the information sessions and fit is so important. But of course, inevitably, it happens. When I do run into disagreements, maybe about just the process or their goals, maybe where something isn't quite aligned, I just try to explain where I'm coming from and say that ultimately whether it's a college essay or a law school issue, ultimately it's their process. They have to do what makes them comfortable. This is where I stand, and this is what I'm going to do. But if you want to do something different, absolutely, you have to trust your gut.
I try not to work with clients whom I disagree with. Um, it just hasn't really come up. When I'm meeting with a client in the initial consultation, I'm very clear about who I am and how I work and what my role is and what the student role is and what the parent role is. And I can typically gauge whether or not it will be a good fit to work with that family and have, referred families to other counselors that might be a better fit for them, because fit with a counselor is as important as fit with a school.
When we talk about value-based target demographics, there's two aspects to this. There's the demographics. So if we look at the data, analytics, that side of things, like we get into a demographic conversation about ages and genders and locations, who's actually going to your website, all of that really good data. The other side of that is your values that you've established. So the ideas that you hold yourself accountable to, your beliefs, all of your mission statement, your coaching statement, your philosophy, whatever you might want to call it. And so the idea is that we can eventually combine those two. And by combining your outreach or even your referrals or your advertising, and making sure that it has and is tied to those values, that you create a funnel of students and clients and families and inquiries that will naturally kind of gravitate towards the people that you want to work with, the people that you work best with. Because if you can establish that sort of system, then it's beneficial not only for you as a professional, but also for the students and families as your clients.
Absolutely. One of the first paying clients that was signing on with me was a bit much at the very beginning. And I reached out to an IECA mentor, and she told me to turn the other way, to run as fast as I can. And I did. And it was a very tough decision, but it was the best one I ever made, because I probably would not be in this field if I had actually worked with that family. So from that point on, I realized that as hard as it is, it's worth alienating some customers because they're not the customers I want to be working with. And it's really important, again, fit with a counselor is as important as fit with a school. And it's important to really work well with families.
I really believe in niching. I think niching is actually the key to business success and financial success. And I know it can be scary because you feel like you might be alienating some people, but actually research shows that the more that you niche, the more you're able to speak to that. Because if you're speaking generally, you're speaking to no one. I'm really active on social media. And so actually, I know that this is not true for a lot of consultants, but I get a lot of my clients through the internet. I get a lot of people who find me through Facebook or through Google or through YouTube. YouTube's huge for me. So the more authentic I am on camera, the more I produce video content, the more that I write or make posts, the more people find out about me. So I just make sure that I have consistent branding throughout my social media, whether that's Instagram or Twitter or podcast, that I'm really putting forth who I am so that when people find me, they will know that, but also so that I can get into those audiences. Like I am part of Black Girls Do Law and several Black LSAT groups. And so I use some hashtags that kind of attract those people who are in those groups and looking for resources and community that way.
Well, I think that that's an interesting question. How has values-based branding helped me attract more customers? I guess, most of my customers are through, or clients are through word of mouth. And I do get some people who found me on the internet or even through the IECA website, which has been great. But mostly I'm getting people through word of mouth. And I think that because I am unapologetically me and people are buying that and buying into that, and then we have a good relationship, it goes well, and then they're recommending me to people, I feel like that's what's bringing me the right people. So it's very rare that someone refers someone to me and then that person's not the right fit. It has happened, but it's not usual. And so I think that by building a client base and then allowing them to be my cheerleaders, that has been really how my business has grown.
I have really wanted to make faith a part of my company since it started. I've been doing this since 2012, but I always had this conception that the two had to be separate, like church and state. And I actually was inspired by a few other businesses and an IEC. There was an IEC who sent out something with the pandemic started, and she mentioned that she was praying for her students. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. And then I follow Learn, Do, Become with the STEP program with April and Eric Perry, and they're really open about their faith. And also the Business Boutique, they're really open about their faith too. And those are pretty large companies. And so I thought, wow, maybe I don't actually have to separate it. I'm part of Epic Fab Girl, which is a Black Christian business group. And it just really gave me the confidence to do that. And it's been so impressive how many clients have said, I chose you because you're a counselor of faith. I chose you because I want someone to pray for me. I chose you because I knew our values were aligned. So even though I was afraid of alienating people, it's actually been the reason so many people have joined, or they said, hey, I heard you do prayer calls. Can I just join that? And then once they're there, they're like, actually, let me buy some more services. So it's actually worked out really well.
It makes me realize that there are just so many different ways to do things, right? And that all of them have their value. And I think that it's so, I don't know, it's just fascinating to me. Like it never would have, some of the stuff that you do, Sydney, never would have occurred to me to do, and but I think it's so interesting and inspiring to hear about it, because it makes me think, oh, maybe there's other things I could be doing, which is always such a great thing.
Thanks. I'm always like, I'm doing something that people aren't doing. And I'm like, am I crazy? This is not what we do. But it's kind of worked out to just sort of forge my own path and be unconventional. And I think in a lot of ways, I guess I am an unconventional IEC, so that fits. But it's definitely always a little scary. Every time I try to do something, I'm like, this is not what the profession does.
Well, I know I appreciate it because, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but one of the things that I really wanted to harp on when I left admissions was I really wanted to really switch to being as authentic as possible. And luckily, worked at Hendrix College, and they were really great because you felt very free to be yourself. But one of the things that has been something that I've worked on through my life is just I've always worn masks, or I've like, code switched, and like I've just had so many different facets of my life that I felt like I was wearing a mask for so long. And one of the big journeys of my life is like slowly taking off or peeling back those masks. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do, and one of the benefits of starting from scratch, is that I wanted to come in knowing that I could take those masks off and just be myself. And I knew that would work in the long run, because just like you said, Sydney, people like authenticity. They like that feeling. And if they're great students or great fits with me, I'm a big nerd. A shocking number of students, I can break through to them because I also know the nerdy stuff that they like. And so one of those things where that was a goal for me. And that's kind of why this idea came up and why I want to kind of go on this journey.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Yeah, just I think when you think about why people hire you, I also agree that I think people just they buy like you're kind of a product. I've productified, like made myself a product. And I know it's different maybe for bigger firms, but like they're really like not just buying college counseling, right? They're buying like you, walking them through the process. And so I think as much as you can show them you, or when they feel like they can really get to know you, then that works. And I know that I've had people, and I'm sure we all have had people who are saying, oh yeah, I'm also talking to other consultants. And I will say that I have probably about an 80% convert rate from information session to client. And it's not from referrals. Actually, a very small number of my clients come by referrals, but they always say, you just seemed more personable. Like it just seemed like I knew who you were in a way that I didn't know who they were. So I knew we would be well together. But I didn't know that from someone else.
Right.
It's funny. I have a very similar convert rate. And I also, get very similar comments. And I think part of it was that, people are like, you just seem like a person, like that. And I think it's because, and I do think that there are people out there who, in trying to maintain a professional demeanor, they create this distance between themselves, which, if that's, what they're interested in doing, is fine. And I do think that there are people who are drawn to that, but I think that this is such a personal process in so many ways that, it makes sense for the people to be drawn to the people who they feel comfortable with. Jess, you were going to say something, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean, we talk so much about like fit with a school. We're talking about like social, academic, and financial fit, and it's rare to hear people talk about fit with a counselor, but that's equally important. Like, if a student doesn't feel comfortable sharing or talking or exploring, then it's just not going to work. It's the same thing I experienced when I was a therapist. Like, I was a forensic psychologist, so my clients were mostly court mandated. And therapy doesn't work if you don't want it to. The same way, like, any sort of counseling isn't going to be as effective or efficient if there isn't buy-in.
Sometimes I get clients who, like, I'll be speaking to a parent on the phone, or I'll be emailing with a parent, and I'll say, and I offer a free 1-hour initial consultation, partly because I want to get to know them. I want them to get to know me. I want the informed decision. And it's so much easier for me to walk away after that hour. I feel like I still gave you something. And if I want to walk away, no hard feelings. But sometimes parents will say, oh, should my child join? And I'm like, yeah,
absolutely.
And what I always say is, like, well, yes. And that, your kid is the one who I'm going to be meeting with, and they should feel like I am a support to them. They should feel, if they're feeling worried, they should feel like, oh, thank goodness I have a meeting with Stacy coming up. That will be helpful. They should feel better after we meet, not worse after we meet. And they shouldn't be dreading it. So if they're going to be like, oh my God, I have to see that woman again, then I am not the right consultant.
Exactly.
Somebody different.
Yeah.
We actually just, sorry.
Go, Jess.
I was just gonna say, we just had a student reach out who was like, actually, like, is it cool if it's just me in the consultation? I'll relay the information to my parents, but like, I'm driving the ship. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I do a 30-minute free info session. It's mandatory that both the parents and students are there, partially because I need the parents to hear me when I say that this is the student's journey, and I need to like hear their reaction, see their reaction, their video information sessions. Part of how I kind of get around, like, I guess, feeling bad if I don't work with them is that I have so much free content. I have so many free YouTube videos and blogs. It's like, look, I don't think I'm the right person for you, but here are all of these resources. And then I'll give you a list of referrals. So I don't have to give you actually that information in the info session. I keep it 30 minutes because that's basically enough time for you to tell me about yourself, for me to tell me like you about myself, for us to talk about the services, and for you not to ask all those questions that I think get into that, like, oh, I don't want to answer or give this free advice. Like, I kind of cut that out. But also I have a video or a blog on a lot of topics. So whatever it is we're going to ask me, it's probably there.
Yeah.
So interesting. I always think that there's this piece about, like, how much do you give away? Right. And I think that's a thing a lot of consultants think about. And I love that you give so much away on your videos and all on your blog. That's my version of it, is to do a 1 hour, and I do answer questions in there. And my feeling is that if after that they're like, well, that was all my questions, I'm done, then they never needed me in the first place. But they'll be grateful that I took the time to answer those questions, and maybe they'll refer someone else to me, and so I just don't worry so much about giving it away in that particular way. What about you guys, Justin Sawyer?
Yeah, I was about to say one of our founding principles is like as much free information as possible. So we do a lot of blogs. We do as like a bunch of different volunteering stuff. We'll a lot of times reach out to high school counselor contacts that I have from when I was in admissions and offer free sessions to their senior classes or their English classes. The one thing we've been wanting to do a lot, but still haven't got around to it, is video content.
Big fan.
Yeah, and that's been a little bit because we're both virtual and we both live in different parts of the country. So it's one of those things where it's rare that we're sitting side by side, and it always feels better to do that video content side by side. But we try and do that a lot. I'm a big fan of infographics. For me, they're like, I think they're just a completely untapped resource, because it's all the key points of information. Nobody wants to read anything anymore, unfortunately. And like with videos, like you're lucky if you hook them in 30 seconds. With an infographic, you can hit all the resources that they need. You can put all those good key findings, slap some great branded colors on it, and then like shoot it out to the world through social media. And, you know, if you want to learn a little bit about, you hear the word like, you know, college fit, and you're like, what in the world, what is a fit? Like, and because a lot of the parents I like working with and the families are first generation, so same thing, they don't have that knowledge. I can be like, well, here's a little, you know, a little photo or a picture, an infographic about like the 7 things we think about when we talk about fit, and like short, sweet, to the point. If you like it and you want more, there's our website.
I was actually scrolling through Facebook last night and came across this infographic, and then I was like, that's really cool. Oh wait, that's ours. That's Facebook trying to get me to pay for advertising with our own infographics.
I love it. That's amazing.
I also want to circle back to something that you said, Sydney, because it hasn't really come up for us yet, but you said that, and I don't think it's something that IECs generally talk about, that we can actually choose not to work with families.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge part of value-based branding, like knowing as the counselor that we're also not the right fit, and being able to say like, look, I'm not sure that I'm the best person to help you.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard because I think, especially with the pandemic, I've heard a lot of people, I've heard kind of both ends of the spectrum. Either they're really busy or they're really, really not busy. But I think one of the things I had a coach tell me once is that you operate in business from an abundance mindset and not a scarcity mindset. When you make business decisions from a scarcity mindset, you're almost always going to make the wrong decision. So if you're making the decision to work with a student because it's the first time the phone has rang in 3 months, and like, you know, you really need it, but they're going to be a bad fit, a bad review or a bad working relationship will cost you thousands upon thousands of dollars, right? That's not a good decision. And I know for me, like, this is my primary source of income. I became self-employed at 26. I did not have a lot of savings or any savings. So it was definitely a financial leap. So I really understand like what it's like to start from like a scarcity mindset. I had been doing this part-time since 2012, but I didn't go full-time until actually April. I wasn't planned to do at the same time as COVID, but here we are. But I just know that when I operate from an abundance mindset and I have faith that it will work out, it does. And I'm always happy when I'm like, that would have been a really bad decision if I had worked with that student and it, you know, they wrote an online review, or you know, they tarnished my name, or I felt like I compromised myself in some way. It wouldn't have been great at all.
Yeah, my first paying client was a great mentor at IECA. I called her and was like, I'm not really sure what to do here, because like I could really use the money, but mom's kind of a little much for me. They've taken a lot of my time already, and I'm generous with my time, but at a certain point, things have to move forward. And she was like, you got to run the other way. And it was the hardest decision ever. But in retrospect, now that I've worked with a lot more families and have had experiences with similar families, like, so glad that wasn't my first experience. I'd probably be in a different field.
I will also say that sometimes there are clients that I won't say they gave me a red flag. They gave me like an orange flag. I'm just like not sure. And I've learned to be a little patient and also a little strongly worded. So if I get an email that like starts to raise some flags for me, I will just like put it out there. Like, this is what I believe. This is what I don't do. This is not part of my practice. Da, 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 da. And then at the end, I'll be like, it's perhaps we are not a good fit. If you are, I'd love to continue talking with you or discuss some of these points. And I don't know if it's because I work with potential law school clients, but I think some of them are just testing me, because they've emailed me back and they'd be like, I was so hoping you answered like that. And I was like, huh, interesting. But then we actually end up being really great fits. But it's because I kind of laid down the law. And I think maybe with first gen students from both college and law school, sometimes I think people are a little wary of consulting and a little wary of consultants and whether this is for real. So I get people who come with their list of questions, and I think it's really to like make sure that they're not about to like get taken for thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So I've learned to just like answer as like strongly and transparent as possible, and then let the chips fall where they may at that point.
In your guys' experience, like do people generally ask a lot of questions? Like it blows my mind that parents aren't asking me more questions about like credentials, which don't really exist in this field, or like why I'm qualified to do this. I've had one parent in 4 years ask me if I visit colleges.
Wow. I mean, I put so much of that information on my website that I assume that, often parents will say, oh, I see you've visited so many colleges because I have the whole list up on my website. Or, they kind of have a little bit of knowledge of my background. But it's true that some of the parents don't ask me as many questions as I would think that they would want to. Also, it's really interesting. I feel like I'm the one often who's educating parents about consulting and about the fact that there are professional organizations that consultants, can and should join. And if, and that so I always say, like, I think it's great if you want to look at other consultants. I'm happy to do that, and say, sure, have an initial consultation with me, go look at other consultants, but make sure that they are members of IECA or HECA, or that they're a certified educational planner, they're members of NACAC. Like, these are the things. And, and here's why. And I feel like that has been eye-opening for some parents who have said, oh, I didn't even realize, that it was such an unregulated business. I think some parents think that that there are standards, and there are not, right? My poodle could hang out a shingle that says college advice and no one's going to stop him. But it's, the fact that we have IECA and HECA and NACAC and AICEP at our disposal, I do feel like that shores me up. And it also, while parents never ask about it, well, I've had a couple of referrals through the IECA website, so that's nice. But also, even though the parents in general don't ask about it, I feel like I'm telling them about it and saying, hey, when you go look for someone, here's what you should be doing. And they're like, oh, okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Well, I was gonna say, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's very interesting for me because parents don't ask as much. Some of them do, probably because I'm so young. I think I get that question more often than the typical consultant, despite the double Ivy League degrees. It's like a very interesting, like, two sides of one coin thing. There aren't as many law school consultants in professional organizations. Like, the largest law school consulting firms in the country are not part of organizations, partially because I think they don't see the value in joining. And that's something that I'm actually actively trying to change, because we don't have the same relationships with law schools that you see on the college side. But because of that, because law school consulting is even more unregulated, I feel like I do get more questions about credentials. There are also a lot of people on Instagram who do this, right? And like, honestly, everything is on Instagram. So I always say, like, yes, it's because of my experiences going through law school and being a lawyer, and I was a practicing attorney, but it's not just based on my experiences. It's also based on the professional development and this and that. And when I say that, people are like, oh, okay, because there are just so many people who kind of go through, even more than the college students who are like, now I can edit your essays. There are so many law school people who are like, I'm in my first year and I did it. Let me help you, or let me blog about my journey. And so I do try to like create some separation between like them and me. Like, I'm a professional. This is my full-time job.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. This was something that we wrote a blog post about, is because we just felt like, well, obviously one of our things is to provide information, but also like it's almost like you're sitting there and like, these are not like best practices for like consultations. And so we wrote one, it was like how to make the most of a free like virtual consultation, and like linked all the like
here's lists, various like standards and organizations. Here's some lists of questions that you should ask. Because obviously, if a counselor is, worth their weight in salt, then they can answer those questions, or at least provide an acceptable answer to something they hadn't thought about before. But it's one of those things where I definitely think, I think one of the benefits of us working together is that Jess has been doing the independent side for about a little bit over 4 years officially. And then I did admissions for about 4 years, a little bit over 4 years officially. And so we can kind of bounce off each other. So when a parent like doesn't like the guidance counselor side, it can be tossed to me because they want to hear it from like an insider in admissions. And then like, if they don't think, because I'm an insider admissions, I'm like a recruiter and a headhunter, then I can toss them over to the guidance side. So that's one of the benefits and why we work well together, is because we can kind of tackle either side of that.
Well, we had recently also started working with families who, like, the parents went to school internationally because they're from other countries, but now they're here and their children are going to be going to the school in the US. So right after we wrote that blog post, we got an email from a family that was like, so how do I prepare for this consultation? We were like, we have something to share with you. But yeah, it just doesn't exist out there.
I love it when you can give people blog posts when they ask a question. Here you go. Actually, I covered it. Here you go.
Yeah, like kids asking for letters of recommendation. Got you covered.
Started making, and this is actually at school really, but and I don't know whether I'll be using it in my private practice or not, but I've started making these little Screencastify videos. These like 3-minute videos about how to do certain things, right? So like how to request a teacher recommendation in SCORE, because that's what we use at school, and screen sharing and like just walking them through it, because I find that for a lot of, and it's true for my clients too, that I'm just like, there's so many of these little processes that I just am explaining over and over and over again, that it makes sense to do these little videos, so that when they say, how do I do this again? I'm like, here, watch this video. Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, no, it's so great. I have little like guides that I have. Some of them are free. Some of them are on my website. If you just wanted to purchase them and you don't actually want consulting, I'm like totally fine. That can be like a $25 investment in your college career, and you can keep it moving. But just like really walking people through those, or checklists, or yeah, just how to navigate these websites.
So I know that we could sit here and talk for hours about all the things, but we're kind of getting towards the end of the session. And so how about everybody goes around and we talk about just some advice for how you can, practical, actionable advice to really start incorporating values-based branding into, what all of the people who are watching this video do. Don't all jump at once.
I can start. So some really good actionable tips for you. First off, so many times I go on consultants' websites and I see the About Me section, and it's like your credentials and where you went to school and like basically nothing else. So I have a Meet Sydney page. On my Meet Sydney page, I actually also have a video, because people love video. And video is the quickest way to get people to trust you. But then I also have a My Story page. And it's kind of long, I'm not going to lie, but it kind of talks about my background and the fact that I applied to colleges based on Gilmore Girls, legitimately thought that Connecticut was like the best place in the world for me, and just accidentally ended up at Princeton because New Jersey was next to Connecticut. But I kind of take you through that journey and the journey of how I got here, because people want to know. And I talk about my values in my story. People are looking for something to connect. So if you are, a descendant of immigrants, or maybe you are a single mom, or maybe you've worked really hard from a second career, like put that there, like let people get to know you. And I promise you, people will come through your website. And then in terms of social media, I know it can seem super overwhelming, but what I tell people is just focus on one or two, or just one, right? Like figure out who your audience is. Like, who are you talking to? Are you talking to moms? Are you talking to dads? Are you talking to high schoolers? Where are they? And then pick one platform and just focus on that. And then you can eventually repurpose your content. So if you picked Instagram, which probably none of you are going to pick, but you can take your posts and you can cross post them on Facebook and you can cross post them on Twitter. There's just a little toggle. So you can hit all three at once. Or if you're doing YouTube, then you can take your videos and you can post them everywhere else, right? But just focus on one, make it match your values, make it match your website. Synergy and branding and brand recognition is so important. And stand for something. Be known for something. Take a position so that you're not known for nothing.
I love
Wow.
that, Liz. I don't know if I
I
have
got nothing.
really exciting to add to that. I would say put your mission statement on your website too.
Yes.
I don't know that my mission statement exactly as it reads is right on my website, but on the first page of my website, there's a welcome and it's mission language and philosophy language. And I also have a page called philosophy, and about my philosophy of college counseling. So I think as much upfront stuff as you can give them about what you do, who you are, what your story is, the better.
Right. I would echo a lot of what's already been said, but great. If you believe in giving free content out and trying to help students, then really commit to that. An easy way to do that too is to put resources on your website. Then you don't even have to deal with the social media side of things. So I know on our website, we have like a list of recommended readings. And in that readings, we have admissions and education, but we also have like diversity, equity, and equality. And then also, since we dabble in startups and startup businesses, we have a whole thing for like a professional side of things too. So making sure you have those resources and that they're easy to find for, DACA students or international students or first gen students, whatever that might be. The other thing I think is like, just be yourself, which always sounds so cheesy and easier than it actually is. But I think that shines through. And I think we talked about that both here and in the questions, but I'll say it again, I'm a huge nerd and like, that's just part of my identity. I love movies, I love books, I love fantasy and sci-fi and video games. And these are all things I've grown up with. And I also like comedy. I like to laugh. I like to be goofy. And like, if somebody doesn't like that about me, that's totally fine. There are so many more IECs out there that can help you through your journey, how you want it to be. But like, I'm a goofy dude. Like I make a bunch of jokes and that's part of it. Laughter is part of like the human condition and growing as an individual, and that holistic growth is finding that happiness and joy. So I think you end up snaring a lot of people. Snare's a bad word.
Yeah.
You end up captivating a lot of people by just being yourself, and like that goes so far. So
Yeah.
I would say that too, is get comfortable with who you are and just learn to be more authentic and learn to kind of shed that like theater-esque business persona a little bit.
Yeah, we talk so much with students about having, authentic narratives in their applications and in their essays and stuff. And it would be completely bogus if we didn't do that in our own practices too. And I think part of that is also just getting comfortable with your actual beliefs and actually digging deep and being mindful of where you are. Like, we're not going to stand for racism. We're not going to stand for certain things, and making that very clear up front and being comfortable in calling people out about those kinds of things, I think certainly helps. But I think that helps just in general as being like yourself in your daily life too.
I'll add one more thing to that because you just reminded me. So on our, because we took this a little bit from Sydney, but we are also in the process of breaking our About Us and like our stories up, because I really like the idea that the About Us has kind of just become like a credential list or like a resume. And that doesn't really speak to who we are and how we got to where we are. And there's a fun and interesting and personable side of that. And one of the things that we put at the top of our stories page is that, we are asking students to be vulnerable, to share their deepest dreams and their darkest concerns and all of this with us. And how can we ask them to do that if we're not willing to do the same with them? How can we ask them to give so much and not give it ourselves? And it reminds me a lot of, I traveled a lot with the CTCL schools, the colleges that change lives. And if you've ever been to one of those college fairs, Maria will often give a speech at the beginning that talks about the search. And one of the things she emphasizes is that, parents talk with students all the time about how this is such an exciting and unknown journey. And, you're going to meet people and you're going to go live with random people and it's all going to be okay. It's going to be great. You're going to make great friends. But then when they turn and they go through the college fair, they'll be like, oh, I don't know that school. Don't stop at that table. And it's like, wait, you're asking them to dive into the unknown and live with a stranger for arguably 4 years, but you don't want them to stop at the table of an unknown school. And so I think it's a similar thing there where we need to be willing to give more of ourselves. If we're asking students to give ourselves, just as we need to be open to the unknown, if we're asking students and families to be open to the unknown. So finding ways to integrate that into your consultation or into your website is, I think, a really powerful message to show that they're not alone, that you're in it with them.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody. This has been really fun.